Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of the Way Up Podcast with your host, Geoff Knoll. In this week's episode, I had the pleasure of speaking with Luge Hardman. Luge spent her career as a school teacher and retired in 2003. She served her community on city council and was the mayor of the city of Waynesville, Missouri. Luge is an author that has released 2 books, Small Town Mayor and Life After Loss. In February of this year, Luge was named Citizen of the Year by the Waynesville-St. Robert Chamber of Commerce. The Way Up Podcast is sponsored by me. I'm a real estate broker in the state of Missouri, and I believe that this message is worth my investment. Hang with us till the end. I know you won't be disappointed. Hey, I'm super excited to be here with my friend Luge Hardman. Over here, I pointed this way because it mirror images and it's actually over there for me, but she was the mayor of Waynesville. She was the Citizen of the Year just for 2022. That was super exciting to watch her get that, but she's also an author. You've put out a couple of books, Life After Loss. This was your first one, and you did Small Town Mayor, and you are working on a third, correct?
Correct.
Awesome. Well, I'm really excited to have you on the show because just the little bit that I know about you, the small little surface that I can see huge success in lots of areas of your life. So I want you to talk about, one, introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about yourself, and then I want you to tell us really about things that you can identify that have positioned you to be successful in all these different areas of your life, Luge.
Well, it's kind of dangerous, Geoff, when you tell me that I can just talk because I'm an old teacher.
Take it.
And then I'm a mayor, and so you know that I'm either an educator or a politician. But I like to say, I'm pretty soon I'm going to be 74 years old. And I say to myself many times, I just have moved from one chapter to another. And you guys might say, well, she's got all these different roles that she's played in her life. And maybe it's my age, but I've begun using the word chapters. And they are the chapters in my book, my life. And, I can look back on all the different chapters that I've had and all the different roles that I've had in my life. You told me kind of think about some of the things that get you through. And one of the first things I thought of was every role I've had throughout my life has had these bumps, just like in your life, all of us in our lives, we have bumps, and we are either going to be stopped by them or we're going to roll over them. Yeah. And I have always had the personality. I've got this AAA personality going on, Geoff. You and I have just become friends recently, and and your wife actually. And I just think the world of you. I've listened to a few of your podcasts, and what I really like about them is that they're positive. It's not negative stuff. And even though there's been some negative things that have happened to me in my life, my husband dying obviously was the biggest one. We all have those things happen because it is life. And mine started, it started in high school because I was always big and fat. And, I wore like a size 24 dress.
Wow.
I don't know if you know that as a man.
I didn't know that.
But now I wear 14. So you can tell that I have lost some weight over the years. But weight has always been a problem for me. And in high school, in junior high especially, and then high school, I think by high school I had figured it out. In junior high, I was very much the butt of jokes. And there was a little cartoon at the time called Little Lulu. My real name is Lula Mae because I'm from the South and we all have 2 names. And so I very quickly became Little Lulu, who was a fat little girl with a bold haircut and not very attractive. And I did not like that, Geoff. And when I had the opportunity to get a nickname very early in my life, I grabbed that nickname. And so my nickname is Luge, as in the Olympics, I always say. It really came from that story. I was the only girl. My brothers, I have 3 brothers that I grew up with. Actually, eventually I had 4. But one of the things that we would do is we would get trash can lids, hold on to the steel handles, lay on the trash can lid, and slide down hills. And one of my neighbors started calling me the Luge because I was pretty good at it. I'd lay down and down the hill I'd go.
Was it snowy hills or was this just?
It was
Just
dirt hills, dirt hills.
really?
So
Well, you
yeah,
were in the South. There wasn't a whole
yeah,
lot of snow there.
exactly. We lived in Oklahoma City at the time when this man gave me this name. But anyway, I fought weight problems. And I think my answer in junior high, I began to realize I can't do anything about this right now. I've got to just become part of it. And so I became the class clown and I was the comedian.
Me
And
too.
that's how I reacted to, the jokes that were made about me, people
Mhm.
that laughed about me. That's how I reacted to it. And so that was one of those bumps. And then the other major bump when I was growing up is that my family was dirt poor. We grew up in the mountains of Arkansas, didn't have indoor plumbing until I was in junior high school.
Oh, wow.
College was far away dream for me. I knew very early that I wanted to be a teacher because I always had great teachers and I wanted to be just like them. And when it was time to go to college, my parents had no money. I talked to my counselor and I said, I want to go to school. I want to go to college. I want to be a teacher. I began to work my way through. I took out some loans. Of course, back then the loans were like 5,000. They weren't 50,000.
Right.
And by George, I graduated from college. And I was the first person in my family to graduate from college, and still am, except for my nieces and nephews. They have, of course, begun to go to college, and several of them have become teachers. So everything you do, there's bumps.
Mm-hmm.
You got to figure out a way to get over the bumps.
Yeah.
And all of us, I think I like what you said about adapting. You've got to adapt. You're a military man.
I'm actually not. I'm not
I
prior
thought you
service.
were. I thought that's what brought you to our community.
No, I came here because my wife's family lives on my road here in Richland. We moved from the Kansas City area,
Oh,
but I
very
don't have any prior
good.
service. I've got some in my family,
Okay,
but
I will tell you this. You really had to adapt if you moved to Richland from Kansas City.
it was definitely a little bit of a culture shock. But I can tell you, I have no desire to go back. I don't honestly even like going back to visit. I don't
Yeah,
even, I don't want to drive the 3 hours to go there.
yeah. Well, it's just a different life.
It
People
is.
people ask me, why do you stay in Waynesville? Because I can go get bread in 5 minutes and be back to my house.
Yeah.
It
There's
takes
some
you 40,
convenience
it
to
takes
that.
you 40. But the real answer, of course, is this is my home and this is where my friends are. And in fact, when I got the Citizen of the Year award this year, one of the things that I said was the best choice I made in my life was coming to Waynesville to teach school.
Yeah.
And of course, I met the love of my life here. I became a wife. And let me just tell you, someone yesterday told me they didn't like the fact that I said, you got to work at marriage. They didn't like that word work because they felt like it was derogatory, that it was negative. And I said, well, you really do have to work at marriage.
Was the
You
person
really
that was
do.
offended by that, are they married?
Yes, yes. But I thought, my goodness, I love being married. I love my husband, but you're partners and you've got to learn to work together.
Yeah.
And so the word work to me was just kind of kind of fit it all.
Right.
One thing I wanted to share with your audience that has stuck with me all my life. When I got married, my grandmother, who I'm named for, said to me, I'm going to give you the best piece of advice that you're ever going to have. She said, never treat your husband worse than you would treat a stranger. Always treat your husband better than you treat a stranger. And that has just stuck with me. And hopefully I live that, with my husband. We had a great relationship. This is the truth, Geoff. We had one fight. In 42 years,
Wow.
we had one fight. And I will be a big girl and say that it was my fault.
Yeah. Well, I wish I could say that I've only had one fight. That's not true for me. That being said, it's unfortunate, but generally, most often, people are the nastiest with the people that they're closest to.
Isn't that the truth?
It
I
is
hate
your family members that you love the most, that love you the most. They get to see the absolute worst side of you, and to strangers, we would never treat people that way.
Exactly.
We would never do that.
And
So
isn't that great that in the 1970s, my grandmother was looking ahead,
no doubt.
and she just knew when you get married, you've got to be partners.
Hmm.
You've got to work at things together. And that's what we did. And
Yeah.
of course, we had 2 children. And so that opened up another role for me, motherhood. And I think the one thing that I learned from that was that you just have to love unconditionally. My son had issues in school, but I loved him no matter what. Today we have the best relationship. I love my children. Both my children are in their early 40s now, have families of their own, and I'm very, very, very proud of them. Very, very.
Yeah. My son's 14 and today is his last day of 7th grade.
Oh my.
But he has struggles in school, and a lot like me, he doesn't want to do homework when he comes home. So we have some frustrations. There is lots of, and really this teenage is so far fairly frustrating. He's been the greatest kid ever. I was so blessed with this sweet kid that honestly,
Geoff is called teenage angst.
yeah. So what age of kids did you teach whenever you were teaching?
I started at Wood Junior High, which at that time was at Fort Leonard Wood, and I taught 7th grade, and then very quickly moved up to the 9th grade. And I
get out of that.
I think all the junior high teachers deserve sainthood.
Oh, it takes a special person.
I'm telling you, you have to have a special personality to teach junior high kids, middle school today.
Yeah.
The term we use. But they were wonderful kids. I loved every minute of it. And when the 9th graders moved to the high school here in Waynesville, I moved with them. There were probably 5 of us teachers that moved to the high school to teach the 9th graders. And that's how I ended up there. So I had 15 years in junior high and 15 years at the high school. Teaching was, it's kind of odd that you mentioned what today is. Today is graduation day in Waynesville. And as we're doing this program today about new beginnings, about adapting, and about new chapters, what an appropriate day.
Yeah, for sure.
For this to happen. Because one of the things that I tell my students, and I still call them that, I was working in the schools this week, doing interviews with little 6th graders. And one of the things that I told every one of them is that you've got to adapt to the circumstances that you're in. And a lot of them, of course, are military students. And so they learned that very early, because they move so much. But
yeah.
Being a teacher, I said the thing that got me through being a mother was love, unconditional love. And I think if I had to pick one word for teaching, Geoff, it would be expectations. I was kind of maybe had the reputation of being a hard teacher because I expected my students to work and I expected them to take part. And as you well know from my Facebook page, thousands of those kids are still my friends.
For sure.
And that's why.
Well, I think back to my school career, the teachers that stand out the most to me, I wish I would have had you as a teacher. I didn't go to school around here, but the teachers that really, I think back about them, they had high expectations. I was a lazy student. I didn't turn in homework. I was not a good student whatsoever. But one, I could tell they cared about me. Right. Like they would put in effort whenever they didn't even feel like I was. They also had expectation for me to do something and they would push me. That sticks with a person. And
as I moved to the high school, I began working with the AP program, the Advanced Placement Program. And so I was blessed to end my career with that program. It was a wonderful adventure for me. And in fact, I got hired on as a consultant nationally. And so went on to another little adventure there. But I think the word for teaching, have you noticed that for every one of my chapters, I've come up with one word that helped me get through and adapt and be flexible. And for teaching, it was expectations. And my students knew what to expect from me, and I knew what to expect from them. And one of the things I always told my students is, I'm going to treat you just like you treat me. And that was my rule. And many of them are still my adult friends. So
Yeah.
teaching was a great thing. I spent 30 years teaching in public school. And while I was at it in the 90s, I started teaching as an adjunct professor for Drury University. So I met a lot of college people, many of those military. Just I was blessed to be a teacher. Being a teacher is a blessing because you touch so many lives, and you're part of so many lives.
Right.
And I would not go back and change anything.
So one of the things that from an outsider looking on, seeing you, get my light turned on, sorry about that. As an outsider, I see a very charismatic person. You connect with people very quick. Whenever I first met you, it was a very, very quick move of we went from being strangers to friends.
Right.
And I gather that that's probably very normal with you. And when I meet people like that, my grandparents were both very much like that. You'd meet them, a stranger, very quickly they would make them feel very special. And all the grandkids, we were all singled out by grandma and told we were the favorite and don't tell the others. And
of course, that's a trick, by the way, but it works. It is true.
It does.
All of them are my favorites.
It does work, but I always wonder what kind of upbringing people had whenever they're charismatic that way. I mean, I have some natural charisma too, but I also study it too. I told my broker, Brianne Sides, we were talking and I told her about a book I was reading about charisma. And she said, "Are you kidding me? You're reading a book about charisma, Geoff Knoll?" I'm like, what do you think causes this? Like, I study, I want to be more able to engage with people and connect with them and actually hear what they're saying. And I want to be able to express effectively that I'm listening and I care about them.
So do you like people?
I love people.
So
I love people.
There you go. You've already got the background that you need. I think that the reason I'm the way I am is because of my mother. My mother never met a stranger.
Yeah.
And I was the same way. My sister is the same way. Two of my brothers are the same way. There's 6 of us. Two of my brothers, very quiet, shy, keep to themselves, but the rest of us are just like mama.
Mm-hmm.
And another thing you reminded me of, the next thing I'm going to talk about is getting involved in local government in my chapters. And people would ask me, what do you like most about being mayor? When I was mayor, of course, I started out being on city council. I would always say the people. And their next question was, what did you hate about being mayor? What did you dislike? And my answer was the people. So, there are certain things. Teaching, you think about my life, Geoff, and yours too, because realty, whatever you're podcasting, you're dealing with people.
Mm-hmm.
Every chapter I've taken has been people oriented. And, I left teaching in 2001. I have been retired 22 years from teaching. It has gone so fast. I just wish it would slow down just a little. But in 2003, I got involved in local government and got elected to city council and really wanted, this story, I really wanted to clean up our downtown. Mm-hmm. Our downtown had really fallen on bad times. And our sidewalks were falling apart. There was no lighting. 70% of the buildings were abandoned and neglected, falling down, trees growing through them, roofs falling in. It was just not a nice place. And my number one goal was to do something to revitalize our downtown. And I got involved with grants. And I found out about grants and the grants that we could get. And by George, me and a committee of 30 citizens in Waynesville worked our butts off doing that project. I represented, of course, the Waynesville City Council. And I think there were several attempts over the years to try to do some things downtown, but the city never got behind it. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people ask me, well, how did it work for you and it didn't work for others? Well, it was because the city got behind it. You have to have a municipality. For example, for grants, you've got to have an entity that backs you. Richland, I believe, is going through some of these same things. And in fact, I have talked to several of your people over there and given them some ideas of what we did. So did that as a city council member. I was also on park board. We built the walking trail. There was just a lot of things that we got involved in. I'm very proud to be part of those. And in 2000, and I have to stop and think, 2012, my husband said to me, if you're going to run for mayor, you need to do it now because Cliff Hammock is not going to run for re-election. And so I ran for mayor in 2012 and did have an opponent. And then I ran again in 2016. My husband had gotten very sick at that time. And so we wanted to do things. We wanted to travel. We wanted to see the rest of our ballparks. That was on our bucket list. Mm-hmm. And we wanted to do those things. But Paul kept encouraging me. He said, you haven't completed doing many of the things that you wanted to do. But I know now, I'll try not to cry. I know now that in the back of his head, he was thinking, I'm not going to make it. And she's going to need something to do. And so he encouraged me to run for mayor and run for re-election. And of course it was life-saving. It kept me involved. And on those days when you were sad and lonely, I had something to do. Okay, I'm gonna quit crying now.
Can I just interject and say that I absolutely adore the fact that you are vulnerable and you talk about things that are real. I read this book. I lost my mom. I lost my mom in 2014.
Uh-huh. And me too, Geoff. Same year.
Well, my dad and her were married for 30 years. It was very, very hard on him. Having somebody that's there to cook and do laundry and do all of these things for you. And then beyond that, to worry about what other people think of expectations for you as to, do I date? Do I move on with my life, or do I sit in this house and just be sad all the time? Because that's not what a loving partner would want for anyone. I read this, and you interviewed different people in the community that are known people. Like, what I was reading through this, I was like, oh my goodness, I know a few of these people. And I bumped into Frances. I don't know if I'm going to say her name right. Do a check. I bumped into her actually last week at Spartan. And I said, hey, I haven't talked to you since I read Luge's book, Life After Loss, but I used to work with her at Walker for some months. We worked together, and I knew that she had a spouse that passed. I had no idea the story. So reading these real stories just really connected me to a lot of people. And the ones that I know, I have reached out. I told Judy Miller a few weeks ago, I said, hey, I've heard nothing but good things about your dad from everybody that's ever talked about Joe Miller. Everybody loves that guy. He made an imprint on this town, on the community. And it's just one of those people that cares and makes a difference. You mentioned something about having to have the city get behind you. What got them to support you when they didn't get behind other people in the past that may have tried? My perspective is, I think that you have a way that you can share your vision and people want to get behind you. You present it in a different light than other people. Even if they're saying the same thing, the way you present it, the conviction, the feeling, you actually want to make a difference. And that resonates with people. That connects to them.
And I believed we could do it.
Yeah.
And I think that's a key.
Yeah.
When I was mayor, I called those people my champions. So anytime you started a project, you get a champion. You have a champion who is the one that's pushing this. And I believe that's what, when I wrote an article for the local newspaper about the downtown project, I interviewed former mayor Cliff Hammock, and that's what he said about me. He said, I finally had somebody who was willing to be the leader.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times that's what you're needing. That's what you need. You need someone to step out and have a vision. Mm-hmm. And one thing that, again, I keep going back to your topic today, you got to have goals. You've got to have some goals. If you don't have goals, you're not going anywhere.
Right.
And we had goals. We actually put together a plan for what we wanted to do. And we achieved every one of them, but I think two. So it was just a wonderful experience, Geoff. And I appreciate the comments that you made about my book. For some reason, it has made a comeback. Been actually selling books on Amazon. Those are available now on Amazon. Both my books are. And in fact, my third one will be also. And I'll talk briefly about that. I don't know how much time we have left. That book has meant a lot to me because it was very personal. And as I have talked to people, and like you, people who have reacted to the things that I have said, so many have said to me, that's exactly how I felt.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and what I tried to do with that book was to put together Frances and Mrs. Miller, all those people that I interviewed, 10 other friends and that had the loss, and every one of them gave me something that helped them get through. And I put that together at the end. So I think, again, going back to my little list of my different chapters, the death of my husband and coming back from that. I think, again, if I had to come up with a phrase or a word that would go with that chapter, it would be a new reality, a new life. And I knew from the very beginning, of course, Paul and I think, I hate to use the word lucky, Paul had kidney failure, and we had 4 and 5 years to talk about everything, plan everything. I knew exactly what Paul wanted for me when he was gone. There were no doubt that was a good thing. And yes, I grieved for months. I think sometimes you just, I call it widow brain or widower brain. Sometimes I would just lock myself in the house, turn all the phones off, and just sit. Of course, I realized very quickly that's not me, and I didn't want to be that way. So my husband died in 2016 in June, and I had just been reelected to the mayor's office. And again, as I said earlier, that kind of got me through. And I enjoyed being mayor every day. It's like teaching. I enjoyed every day of teaching. Till the day I quit. Mayor office was the same. I could have run again, but I was getting older and I had things that I wanted to do. And of course, I left office just as COVID was hitting. And think back,
Smart.
I was supposed to leave office in April, and I didn't leave office till June because the governor moved the elections back because of COVID. I had a trip planned for a cruise with a friend, and had to put that off, of course. So all kinds of things happened then. And I began to work on a book. And so my next chapter was being an author. And something, Geoff, that was just on my bucket list. I wanted to write a book. And I became good friends with Lindsay Teal, who was actually my student. I had her in my classes.
Really?
Yes. But we were very good friends. And Lindsay had taken up doing the Kindle direct print publishing. And we hooked up on Small Town Mayor. And I will tell you that it did very, very well. It was a success for me money-wise. It was a success for me critic-wise. I won 2 awards for it. Just really have enjoyed writing. I've always been involved in writing. Even in high school, I was the editor of the newspaper, worked with the newspaper in college. So if I had to think of one word that got me through my book writing chapters, it would be organization. When you're an author, when you're writing, when you're doing a podcast, you have got to be organized. And so that was the word that really resonated with me as I was putting these stories together. And I will just, again, tell your audience that my books are on Amazon because I did use Kindle Direct Print, which is their program. I released Small Town Mayor in 21. I released Life After Loss in 22. And in August of this year, my father would have turned 100 years old. And I am releasing a book called Hello, Darling, Letters from My Father. When my mother died, we went through her things. She had never told us this. She had 84 letters wrapped in a ribbon in her safe deposit box. And they were from my father, who had served in the Pacific during World War II. He was there when the atomic bomb went off. He was there at so many important battles. Of course, I'm a history teacher, so I'm loving this, right?
Yeah.
First, and then second of all, oh my gosh, probably first of all, was the fact that this was my parents' love story. And every letter, Geoff, began, "Hello, darling."
Wow.
So that's the title of my book. When my mother died, the preacher told the story about, she always had this ringtone on her phone. It was Conway Twitty's "Hello, Darling." It's a song. For you young whippersnappers, that's a song, "Hello, Darling." And the preacher told the story at her funeral that one Sunday morning he was preaching and it got quiet for a second and Marie's phone went off and Conway Twitty filled the church. And so when we found those letters, my sisters-in-law, we found those letters. I came home and didn't read them for a while. And as I began to read them and put them in order and kind of put together a story in my head of what I wanted to tell, I began to realize that's why she had that ringtone. Now we know the rest of the story. So just really looking forward to that. I think it's going to be a great thing for my family more than anything.
Yeah.
And I went down and bought a veterans banner. You know, they put those banners up every year downtown.
Mhm. Yeah.
And I bought a banner for my father because it's his 100th birthday. He was born in 1923. And so now his 100 years later, his daughter is going to release a book about his love story with my mother. There is nothing more touching. Again, I'm going to cry. There's nothing more touching than to look at a letter that was full of love. Oh my God, he was so in love with her. He was so stricken with my mother. She's a beautiful, beautiful woman. My mother loved this letter so much that she put on fresh lipstick and kissed it 3 times.
Oh, wow.
And to read a letter that you know your mother put her lips on was so touching to me. So it's been a great adventure. Don't know if I have another book in me, Geoff. I do have one other idea. We'll see. I think I'm going to take some time off. I've got some travel I want to do.
Yeah.
And, but I'm thinking about writing a book called Tales from the Chalkboard.
That would be a good one.
Because all my career, I had a file in my left-hand drawer. And when kids would do silly things and funny things, especially on tests, I would always make a big deal to my students. I'd say, "Another one for the file." And I actually looked through that file the other day and just enjoyed it so much. So that may be my next adventure. We'll see. So being an author was another one of those roles. And I know we're running out of time here, so let me mention one more. And that is, last January, I had heart trouble and had to have a heart valve replacement. And let me just tell you, that will slap you in your face. And I began to, here's my word for that chapter of my life, change.
Yeah.
And I began to think about, gosh, I won't tell how much I weighed, but I weighed like a defensive lineman.
Yeah.
And I said, I don't want to be a defensive lineman. So I began doing a little research, and my son had used this process, intermittent fasting. I don't fast like the real program. They go actually days of not eating. I can't do that. I'm too old. But I kind of readjusted it, made it into my lifestyle, how I live, and ended up making some changes in my life. And Geoff, I'm just telling you, it has worked for me. Since last September, I've lost 45 pounds.
That's fantastic.
And it's not, I'm not obsessed with it. It's not I'm on a diet. I want to be a size 2. I ain't going to be any size 2.
Right.
I would be real happy being a size 12.
Yeah, for sure.
So anyway, I learned very quickly of all those chapters of my life. You learn very quickly what works for you, right? Don't just spin your wheels. Don't spin your wheels. If it's not working, move on to something else. And those things worked for me. Again, today's graduation day, and wish the kids the best. And if I had to tell them, I kind of thought about this when you told me the topic. If I had to tell them the best advice that I could give them, looking back over, I think, my very successful life. I've had a blessed life. I've been successful at the things that I've done. And what is it that got me through it? Well, number one is adaptation. You've got to be able to adapt to situations. And then you've got to be flexible because you got to work with people. You got to work with situations. For example, my heart thing, I had to be flexible because there were some things I couldn't do. Acceptance is another one. I think sometimes we rail against where we are in life instead of just accepting where we are and working with it and making it better.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's important. Goal setting, I cannot say that enough. You've got to have goals. And, at every time of your life, whether you're a kid getting out of high school today, you've got to have some goals. What are you going to be doing? What kind of job are you going into? Are you going to vocational training? Are you going to college? Those are important things. And then lastly, you got to have at least a little self-confidence and belief in yourself. And I think a lot of people, especially kids right now, maybe because of COVID, struggle with that. They struggle with having some belief in themselves. But have a serious talk with yourself. Everybody's got a value. Everybody's got something that they're good at. And that's what you need to be focusing on. So if what is that? 5 things. I came up with 5 things that I thought were just really important for the way up.
You've got to have direction. You got to be able to roll with the punches because things don't always play out the way that we see them in our mind. So being able to adapt, make the course correction, it's okay that things don't play out the way that we think they do. And the challenges that we face in life are often setting us up for how are we going to be able to help somebody else down the road. Losing your husband, awful thing. I wouldn't wish that on anybody, but because you've went through that and you have shared your story with other people, you are helping other people with that. So I can look back over a lot of the things that have been unfortunate or unsavory in my life. And honestly, I can be thankful for the fact that, God's always taken care of me. I'm always provided for, but I can use that. It's not going to knock me down. This is just, how do we get around this? What's the next step? How do we progress forward? And you've done an excellent job of this. So thank you for coming on.
Oh, you are more than welcome, Geoff. You have been a joy, and I've really enjoyed this kind of a walk through my life a little bit. So, sometimes introspection is good. And
it is, for sure.
That's what you've given me for this. So.
For sure. Well, I appreciate you. You have a lovely day, and thank you so much for what you do and continue to do.
You are more than welcome. God bless you.
I do want to say one more thing about you. What separates you from a lot of politicians is you still continue to work on making change in the community. You're still involved. You haven't, I did my time and I'm done. You still care. You still are making a difference. I'm very grateful for you. I appreciate that. Being a real estate agent in the area, anything that makes the community better and people like you that are striving to improve on things that we have, that's fantastic. That creates community. It makes people have a nicer place to live and makes it more enjoyable to be here. So,
well, I appreciate that.
For that, I thank you so much.
Yeah, boy.